With all respect, Baron, for a ghost, she's a very active young woman. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you. I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is season 4, episode 16, and we are watching Roger Corman's The Terror. Join us if you dare.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. So, listeners, if we look back with what's going on in the world right now, it feels like years since previous episodes, because every day seems so long as we're all social distancing and getting scary news reports about the state of the world right now. And first off, we just want to say we hope that everybody listening to this is okay. And we thank you so much for listening. And we hope that this brings a little bit of levity and entertainment to your day as you're maybe trying to escape the news. So if we look back on our last couple episodes, we did kind of a mini in February and basically in February, we did kind of a mini Poe series. So we talked about the collection His Hideous Heart, which has contemporary, mainly young adult horror and thriller writers reinterpreting Poe tales. We also talked, we had an episode about Roger Corman's The House of Usher movie with Vincent Price. That was a take on Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. And we did a couple mini episodes about takes on Poe's story. So at one point, we talked about the 1928 American short 13-minute silent film about the House of Usher. And then we had another mini episode about the 1953 animated Telltale Heart that was narrated by James Mason. So once we kind of did that kind of mini series on Poe, we decided we wanted to go a little bit deeper into Roger Corman because we had never done a Master of Horror episode on him and his career as a director and producer in horror, classic horror, all the way up through like Sci-Fi Channel movies and even movies today that he's producing. It's just been a long career that helped a lot of actors and directors kind of spin off into their own careers from working with him. So we ended up doing an episode on 1963's X, The Man with X-Ray Eyes, and talking a bit about Roger Corman's career as a whole. So after we talked about X, we were like, things in the world are really crazy right now. We talked about what we could do next for another episode, and we decided we would watch Corman's The Terror, which also came out in 1963. It's available for streaming through Amazon Prime. So if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can watch it very easily. And basically, in the documentary Corman's World, almost everybody who is asked about this movie, particularly Jack Nicholson, I think he talks about it the most, basically say that the movie is nonsensical and has no plot. And there's a little bit of a story behind how it actually got made. So if you're brave enough to watch it along with us, after we talk about it, if you go watch it, there can't be spoilers because there's really no plot. But if you decide to pause and go watch the movie, you'll see what we mean about it being an interesting mess. And so we'll probably end up bringing our interpretations of what happened more than actually telling you what happened. But let me give just a little bit of background about how this movie actually happened. So basically, Corman had completed filming The Raven in 1963, and Boris Karloff still had, I think it was like 2 days left on his contract. And so Corman wanted to go ahead and take those 2 days and try to get some footage with Boris Karloff to be in another movie. So this movie was made in a very short amount of time, and it used actors that had been in The Raven. So Boris Karloff and Jack Nicholson in particular. I believe it was Sandra Knight played the leading lady role in The Terror. They also use sets. One article said they used some stuff from the Haunted Palace, which came out that year. They also used a set from The Raven. So they had these sets and they had Boris Karloff. So they're like, let's hurry up and do something. So they whipped up this plot of sorts that is kind of it was Leo Gordon and Jack Hill were the screenwriters, whipped up this kind of gothic plot that has a lot of similarities to the Poe movies, the Poe cycle that Corman had already been doing. And they proceeded to make this movie. There were, if you look at IMDb to get the full cast and crew on The Terror, there were 7 directors that had a hand in directing it. So you have Roger Corman directing a bit, Francis Coppola directed for a couple days, Jack Hale directed for one day, Monty Hellman directed, Jack Hill, Dennis Jacob, and Jack Nicholson directed, I believe, the final days work on the film. And so in Corman's world, they talk about how I believe the first director had to leave to go work on another project, and somebody else stepped in. They left or quit. Anyway, so they had this like rolling cast of directors that were coming in. And a lot of times they were just kind of shooting film of people doing things that they thought they could then put into a story at the end. So if you're watching the movie and you wonder why every time the bird appears, even when it's at night, the bird is flying in front of the sun, it's probably because they just had some footage of the bird and they just were plopping it in every now and then. There's a lot of just characters walking around or running up and down stairs because they did these kind of transition scenes to kind of have something to mash up together. So I could attempt to give some sort of plot, but I'm not sure that's actually possible or even worthwhile at this point in our discussion. This was my first time watching The Terror. Lisa, Matt, I'm assuming it was your first times as well. What are our impressions of this movie now that we've watched it?
I am going to. Well, I will tone down my response for this recording from what I had originally said before we actually started recording. But as soon as the movie ended, and I watched it last night so I could be ready for it today, this recording, I'm trying to keep a nice PG rating, but my first thought was, what the hell did I just watch? Like that's the only way to sum up that movie. Like what is this hot mess? Like I I love movies that are so bad they're good, and I think this in some ways falls into that category, but I don't know, it might just be so bad it's bad as well. Like it's right on it's walking the borderline between the two.
This this movie. This was my first time watching it. I had heard about it from the Corman's World documentary and was, very, very excited to watch it. And I agree with you, Matt, that it is definitely bordering. It falls into the category of bad movie. It is on the border of so bad it's good, but then also it kind of swings back again into, well, no, it's just bad. There, okay, I don't need. Uh, this movie, I will tell you, it starts out as a pretty stock standard gothic story. So, listeners, I think we've mentioned this in the past. When I was working on my PhD dissertation, I was looking at gothic novels from Britain from like, I don't know, 1790s to like 1820 or something around there. And there were a lot of gothic novels. Like, I mean, we tend to focus on some of the best ones like Anne Radcliffe and things like that, but there were some just pretty terrible ones too. And this movie started out like a lot like those really bad formulaic gothic novels, because you have a castle and there's a storm and there's a soldier returning from somewhere or going somewhere, or I don't know, he's lost. And there's a beautiful woman who may or may not be a ghost. And for whatever reason, there were lots of shots very early on of skeletons popping out of places. But it felt like a pretty standard gothic novel. So you have this kind of brewing love story between the soldier and this beautiful maybe ghost woman. and there's a mystery about because she kind of keeps disappearing, and so the idea is he's trying to find her. Oh, and there's a witch character, which again is pretty standard. There's like a hermit, she's like this weird old hermit lady who lives out in the middle of nowhere, the woods. Okay, yeah, fine. It's all very gothic. It's all very kind of fairy tale-ish. But then at some point, I don't even know what happened. And the best thing that I can like liken it to is it was the feeling of watching a movie while you're really drunk, but I wasn't. Because things just start happening and the characters are saying lines and pretty decent ones. Matt, you opened with one of my favorite lines now in all of cinema, which is with all respect, Baron, for a ghost, she's a very active young woman. I mean, there are some pretty funny lines in the thing, but they're said almost apropos of nothing. And, and there are points in the movie where the characters just kind of deliver these long monologues, and it's it's something.
Yeah, they're not actually interacting with each other. They just kind of go off on these speeches at each other.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, one of Karloff's speech as the Baron Victor von Lepp, where he explains, that the ghost girl doesn't exist because the woman's been dead for 20 years, blah, blah, blah. And then when he tells about finding his wife with another man and killing her, and he's got this guilt and all this Poe-like stuff that's going on, he's like really chewing the scenery and doing a really good job with like not so much to work with. But yeah, it's like the lines, they're saying things, but they're not actually communicating with each other. Like when Jack Nicholson's character is talking to the woman and he's like, when she disappears, it doesn't even seem to phase him. He just finds her and says, "Oh, you didn't say goodbye." And he's like, "For that matter, you didn't say hello either." And then she just starts randomly laughing in this high pitched way. And he's like, "You can laugh. That's okay." And I'm just like, what? Like, I don't understand. Yeah, it was very disjointed and odd. And it's not always because of the editing.
Well, and
Yeah.
we
Well,
should point out for our listeners that as disjointed as it is, there is some fantastic people attached to this movie. I mean, we've already mentioned Boris Karloff is in it. Jack Nicholson, I mean, baby Jack Nicholson is in it as the soldier Andre. Um, Roger Corman directed it. Francis Ford Coppola was producer and stepped in at one point to be one of the directors. Like this had real talent attached to it.
Boris
Which I
Karloff, of course.
Yeah, which just I think makes it all the more strange when you're watching it because it should not be this bad.
Yeah,
Well, I
Dick
think
Miller
I
played Stefan too. So another, sorry, but there's another name, attached to
Yeah.
it as well. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think and what helped me make it through because there were definitely a couple of moments in the movie where I was like, if it weren't for this podcast, I don't know that I would keep watching it. Um, I mean, I love bad movies, but it's much more fun with a group of people than just by yourself. And I was literally watching it by myself. I'd ran the rest of my family out of the living room pretty early while watching this. But I think one thing that did help was knowing the history behind the movie before I watched it, knowing that like all of Boris Karloff's stuff was shot over 2 days because, I mean, it was one of those contractual obligation things. And for those of you that are fellow bad movie connoisseurs, you may be familiar with another uh, victim of contractual obligation, and that would be Highlander 2, wherein you have a character who died in the 1600s returning from the dead, and you find out that the Highlanders were aliens all along. So it's a movie so bad that the third one famously just ignored its existence. And I feel like knowing that Karloff was like still under contract and they're like, hey, we just want to use you, let's make a new movie, like that helped a lot explain the disjointedness of it. But some of the things were just downright inexplicable though. Like, can anyone explain to me why the servant or the major domo, whatever he was, talked with like this weird breathy whisper? Like, was that ever explained? Did I miss something? Because he always talked like this. And it's not quite the Batman bat voice, but it's like
I feel like
He was supposed to be a mute, but then he all of
yes.
a sudden starts talking, so it's like really breathy, like he can barely talk.
I
Yeah.
must have missed that he was
Well,
a mute,
The
but
witch
I,
says that, and it's unclear as whether he really is a mute or not, but I think that's why or she's just saying it. I think that's why he's breathy. Sorry, Lisa. I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh no. He was supposed to be a mute character. And then if I remember right, they realized that that the movie was not making enough sense put all together. Um, and so they had to have him there as quite literally a plot device, as just there to like explain
so
things.
his role was literally exposition. Like, this
Yeah,
is what
he was the
I
character
know
that.
you've watched this, but this is what's happening.
Right.
Hmm.
Because if you
Okay.
remember, like the first time you hear him talk, he's talking to Andre the soldier, Jack Nicholson's character in the woods. And he's the one who tells him, like, by the way, that ghost girl you like, she lives at the castle. And that's what takes him to the castle of Baron von Lepp or whatever whatever Karloff's name is. Um the names in here are hilarious. Because they do sound right out of a gothic novel. But so you had Andre the soldier, and yeah, he needed to get from the woods to the castle, and he was the plot device to get him there. This was one of those movies that I'm fascinated by from a filmmaking standpoint, because Mel, you mentioned in when you were describing how they made the movie, that each of the directors, Corman especially, wanting to make use of the set and wanting to make use of Karloff for as long as he had them, which was basically days. I think they said a weekend, that they before this was being torn down. And so he was just like, well, we'll edit this movie together, basically. So he was just telling them to do things, like go walk down this staircase and I'm just going to film it and I'll put it somewhere, or open this door and we'll have a skeleton pop out. And he was just like, I will fix it in editing. Like that was his whole thing, is that he could edit a movie together. And so I think if I remember right, that um that's why the mute suddenly had to talk, because he realized that the plot never did come together. And so he had to have him there to explain things, which kind of, again,
Did either of
makes
you
me kind of love it.
stumble across the quote from Boris Karloff about the making of this movie?
Oh, I didn't. I've only heard Nicholson talk about it, because he talked about it a little bit in that documentary about Roger Corman. But what did Karloff
Okay.
say?
So I found this quote, and I'm going to truncate it just a little bit because there's some in the middle that's interesting, but not, I guess, as necessary for what we're talking about here. But so here's what he had to say: Corman had the sketchiest outline of a story. I read it and begged him not to do it. He said, "That's all right, Boris. I know what I'm going to do. I want you for 2 days on this." I was in every shot, of course. Sometimes I was just walking through, and then I would change my jacket and walk back. Uh, let's see. So then, after he got me in the can, he suspended operations and went off and directed 2 or 3 operations to get the money, I suppose. Uh, so the sets were so magnificent, but uh, as they were being pulled down around our ears, Roger was dashing around with me in a camera 2 steps ahead of the wreckers. It was very funny. So, like, because they were reusing sets not just from The Raven, but like they ended up reusing a couple of other sets from other movies as well. I know one of them was a Vincent Price movie, the name of which is like right on the tip of my tongue right now. But yeah, like they were literally just running through filming stuff as the sets were being like struck, and I'm like, oh yeah, that explains so much about this movie. Like it really was just like slapped together, literally.
If you could imagine a movie being duct taped together, like that might be a good description for what's happening here. And yeah, like the most bare bones of plot, because a good half of the movie is just Nicholson trying to find his ghost girl. And he speaks with several different characters, and it's the same conversation. Like, that's why I said it really is on all levels kind of a terrible movie, because, he speaks with the witch and he says, "I've seen this beautiful girl." And she says, "There is no girl." And he speaks with, when he gets to the castle, he speaks with, who was it? Stefan?
Yeah,
Uh,
Stefan.
Stefan, yeah, the servant. And, he says, I've come to see the girl. Oh, there is no girl. He speaks with the Baron, Karloff's character, I've come to see the girl in the castle. Oh, there is no girl. And then there's the big reveal where he takes him to the painting and he's like, "But she died 20 years ago." And I don't know if you actually hear it, but in my head, I heard the dun, 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 because that's the level of movie that we're working with. Is, it drags you on for like 30-40 minutes following this girl that is probably a ghost already.
Or a bird. She's either a ghost or a bird.
Or a bird, that's right, because there was the witch lady had a bird named Elaine. But yeah, they changed her name too, because as a ghost she was Helene, and as a bird she was Helene, but in
But
life she was Ilsa.
yeah, she was possessed by the ghost of Ilsa, but she was just some girl named Helene. That was the
Yeah.
impression that I got. Yeah.
Yeah,
think-
But maybe she was a bird too, or the water. Like, there was at one point where they said she was like a water spirit or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know for sure that they were sure what she was, but yeah, I think they finally settled on she was like a living girl that had been possessed by the ghost of the woman that died 20 years ago. But
Oh, yes, because that's the conversation they have in the crypt, right?
yes.
Because that Andre, and he's found his beautiful girl and he wants to rescue her. And I laughed so hard. I can't believe I forgot about this part. She said my other favorite line is when he's like, "I want to take you away." And she says, "I am possessed of the dead." And she repeats it like several times. And she's just like, "The dead. I am possessed of the dead." And he looks at her with like a straight face and is like, "They're doing wonderful things for crazy people in Paris. Let me take you to Paris." I'm paraphrasing there, but that's basically what he says is, "It's okay. It's okay that you're possessed of the dead. They can fix you in Paris."
Well, I think in that moment, he was supposed to be, a skeptical rationalist who doesn't believe that she's a ghost. But then that's really the only time that happens. Like, his character isn't presented as such throughout the movie. It just sort of, oh, this will be a good idea. Let's throw this in now while we're halfway into the movie. So, let's change course midway through.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh. Okay, so at the point in the movie where I feel like they just gave up with a plot, because like I said, for most of the movie it was kind of a budding love story, and you were trying to see if she was really like a ghost or a real girl, or I pinpointed it where I thought they just don't care anymore. Like, they're just putting a movie together and just, it's like throwing spaghetti on a wall to see what sticks. Was when, and I think it was Gustav who got his eyes pecked out by, is it the bird version of Helene?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a genuinely gross scene. Like, I was kind of impressed with that scene. I don't know why it was there, but I liked the scene a whole lot.
Yeah, he was trying to get Andre to go back to stop the Baron from committing suicide because the ghost was telling him to. I mean, this is my impression. And then the bird killed him, but Andre ended up going back anyway because the bird just pecked his eyes out and threw him off a cliff. He didn't stop him from talking somehow. So he
I
still
forgot
told
about that.
Andre
He
to go
did.
back.
He
Yeah.
did still talking.
My
Yeah.
my favorite part has to be what Jack Nicholson talked about in his interview, which is the scene where I think they try to bring the plot back. I think you're right. That part just makes no
No, that
sense.
was where they gave up.
But when Nicholson throws Stefan up against the wall, and Stefan and Andre and the witch tell you the entire plot because there's no way you would have known. So they literally have to like make up something. So Andre is like, the old woman has Helene possessed by Ilsa to kill the Baron because the Baron killed her son, the witch's son, Eric. And he's like, but that's not true because you killed Eric, Stefan. And Stefan's like, I didn't kill Eric. The Baron killed Ilsa and Eric killed the Baron. And then somehow Eric transmogrified into the Baron and doesn't know that he's not the Baron. And literally, like, they are just yelling questions at each other. And that's how they figure out that, she's trying to kill the Baron because the Baron killed Eric. But then at the end of the movie, the ghost says, I know you're Eric. So the witch's plan wasn't even right.
Well, I
Well,
think
and the wit.
well, I think what they were going for, what they were trying to do, is have it be that the witches orchestrated this thing, and it's not even right, but they do it in such a convoluted way that it ends up making no sense. Like if they had just stuck with the witches trying to kill the Baron, but the Baron didn't actually kill the son, it was Stefan, that would have been okay. But no, that's not enough. It has to be that the son actually, his soul went into the Baron, but he doesn't know that he's not the Baron. That was, I had to pause the movie and get up and walk around for a second and go, what?
Yeah, I had to write it all down. Like, I have this weird little, like, almost like graph here in front of me where I'm like, Stefan thought this and this person thinks it. But yeah, in the end, the ghost knew it was Eric the whole time. And I'm like, is that interesting or just as useless as everything else? Because she was a ghost. She rots away in the end. So there was something supernatural going on. But yeah, Matt, you're right. It's just like, let's try to explain this, but we're gonna make it too hard even for ourselves to explain.
Y'all saw so much more of a plot there than I did. I mean, at the end, I just gave up because I wrote down Helene is Ilsa ? She wants to go back to the sea. She's under witch's orders ? She wants to kill Eric, who is the Baron ? And I wasn't sure because there was that one scene too where, like, I think Stefan was spying on the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he learns, or Stefan, I don't know what his name is, but I don't know what anybody's name is in the movie because I feel like they forgot. I was okay. This was me. I thought you could have had a pretty simple stock standard story here, right? Like, Andre shows up, he's lost because he's entered into a supernatural space. Okay, that makes sense. Like, that's why you show up and his compass is going all wonky. Okay, he's a horse on the beach, fine. He sees this beautiful girl. He follows her, and all this danger starts to kind of befall him. At one point he yells something about quicksand, but I don't know if we ever saw quicksand or if he was just warned it was in the area. But I do remember somebody talking about quicksand. He chases the beautiful woman and nearly drowns, which I think I saw something that Nicholson said he really almost drowned in that scene. Because they filmed it in Big Sur, I think. And anyway, I don't know if that was a real story or not. But I think I remember reading something about that. So, okay, it could have just been about a guy who has like stumbled upon this enchanted castle and fallen in love with this ghost girl. And it would have been fine if, say, the girl is Ilsa or whatever her name is. I mean, pick one, I don't care. Elaine or Ilsa. And she had died at the hands of like the murderous baron. You know, she had married him young and was killed kind of like a Bluebeard situation, right? And then the witch was her mother who is now using some sort of sorcery to bring her daughter back in order to exact revenge. Like that could have just been the story. I will never understand what birds and water and boarded up crypts and Eric's soul flying into another body, but he doesn't know he did it. Like, that's where you lose me. I'm like, you could have just made a pretty, just simple story of, you know, Jack Nicholson accidentally walks into a haunted castle and there's a revenge plot going on. Like, that could have just been it. And I mean, there was already some good imagery. You know, you could have had the eyes pecked out or somebody drowning or you know, I liked her like going to dust or whatever she does. You know, she rots as he goes to kiss her or whatever. Like that is effective, but you could have had just a very simple plot. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Symbolism.
Why
That's what it was.
there
I can't tell you what
there
it
were
symbolizes, but it was all symbolism. No, well,
there were so many speeches at the end. There were so many speeches. I just didn't understand.
it felt to me, and Lisa, your kids may be right around the right age for this to really ring true to you, but it really felt to me by the end, it was like a story told to you by an 8-year-old. You know, it starts off kind of having a plot based on something that they're like they've seen or heard and are familiar with. And by the end, it is so crazy and convoluted and has had so many detours that you're just like, uh-huh, mm-hmm, and then what? And eventually the story ends. Like that's kind of what it
Yeah.
felt like to me. And maybe that's
Uh
because it had so many directors or because it really didn't have a script going into I don't know, we can blame lots of things, but it really felt to me like a kid telling a story.
I think you're right. And I think I actually, yeah. You know, we just watch. Well, I do have two little boys, and one of their favorite shows right now is Lego Masters, which I highly recommend if y'all haven't
I was
watched
gonna
it.
say, I love the show as
It's
well.
so good. And but they did that episode recently, which was something very similar, where they um had them build this kind of fantasy story that these 8-year-olds, well, I don't know if they were 8 years old, but these kids like came up with. And then they had him come like halfway through the build and be like, okay, we're adding some more crazy things. And it was like that. It was like, okay, they've got this cohesive story. And then it's like, now carrots are attacking.
Yes. And
That is,
they're in the
no, you
land of
nailed it on the
cuckoo
head.
magic and yeah,
Yes.
like yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I won't completely embarrass my younger brother in semi-public here on this podcast, but all I'll say is when he was about that age, he created his own superhero, a la you know, Batman or Superman or something. And it had the most ridiculous, like just flat out made up name. I won't say it because he'll he may hear this and come find vengeance on me for it. But you know, I felt like this was on that same level of well, yeah, like you said, the kids on Lego Masters. It's the Taker Waker and the Land of Cuckoo Magic and a Book Chicken, and like make that slightly more understandable with adult language, and you've got this movie. So,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the plot of this movie.
Yeah, because at the beginning, again, it's everything you need for a good story. You know, it's a creepy castle. There are skeletons. There's a ghost. There are birds that want to attack you. There's quicksand outside the castle. I I mean, there's really everything. There's an aging baron with a secret. There's a servant who's loyal, you know, but is willing to keep the baron's secrets. There's a love struck, clueless, you know, soldier coming in. There's the witch in the woods. Like there's everything you need. Like it should have gelled together into something. And then at the end, you're just left with, I don't know how to describe this movie. And I don't think they did either, because let's talk about the title a little bit. They called it The Terror. I don't know what the terror is anymore.
I was hoping that one of you would bring this up because I wanted to bring it up if neither one of you did. But yeah, I don't either. I mean, in some ways, I feel like the movie itself is the terror. Like but I don't know. And apparently, it went through. It had multiple names in different releases and whatnot. God, I don't remember where I read that. Probably Wikipedia or some offshoot from there. But yeah, like the name doesn't make any kind of sense or have any sort of relation that's obvious to the plot of the movie. So I don't know where it came from.
No, just looking, I'm looking at the poster for the movie, and it's got Boris Karloff's face really large, and then it's got like women caught in a web. So the idea, again, it kind of feels like they're playing with this idea that he's this murderous baron, and like women go to him, like he marries these young women and they die somehow. Which again, that would have been a really good story, especially if that was the twist on the old fairy tale, right? Where instead of just having this murderous man who's killing his young wives, you now have like a mother of one of the women who's a witch and is now using necromancy to bring back the women to like exact their revenge on him. Like that would have been a cool story. And they almost had that, but they didn't. And this is the tagline for it: Dracula, Frankenstein, House of Wax, Pit and the Pendulum, and now the Terror.
Well, that's just listing a bunch of things. That's not.
Yeah.
And then it says, oh gosh, I just noticed this part. Okay, you ready? No one will be admitted while the coffin is being opened. Did they open a coffin?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And it
I
was
don't remember this. I must have blacked out.
it was at the end when Karloff is like flooding the crypt to kill himself or something. They open the
Oh, that's
they
right.
open the coffin and she's like decomposed. And I think that's when he realizes that it's not actually her ghost, or that the ghost is not trying to help him. I don't know.
I'm looking, they had multiple taglines. Another one was a diabolical plan of torture. It's inconceivable and unbelievable. It's unbelievable, all right. And inconceivable, because it makes no sense.
Well, clearly it was conceived, but it was not conceived well.
It was ill conceived.
Yeah, I don't. I'm looking to see some of the other names of this film. The Terror seems to be what it got quite a bit called. In the United Kingdom, it was actually called The Haunting.
I mean, I think that's a little closer to what it is, but it's not.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
I don't know.
As far as sense can be in this movie.
I will say the version I watched was black and white. I don't know if that's the one y'all caught. I saw that one because it was free on Amazon Prime, and I'm glad I did not pay for this film. But now I kind of want to see it in color.
I
If
saw
you
I watched the free one and it was in color.
Mine was free, but I actually, I watched it on Tubi, but, so it had a
Huh.
couple of, brief commercial interludes in there, which
Mm.
actually normally I don't like, but I was kind of okay with because they kinda helped me, like, retain sanity.
Mm.
Like
Process what
Yeah.
was happening.
well, no, I never processed what was happening. I had thought that
Yeah.
us talking through this would kind of be a process what happened therapy session, but no, I still don't know what happened.
Yeah, it was really intense color too. Like the sea was like super blue. I'm assuming it was the same thing in yours, Matt. It was almost like it was colorized and not, I don't know, it was hard to tell.
Yeah, it
I'm
might have
looking to
been.
see if it was in Vistascope.
Well,
So
what
there
is
you
that?
go. I don't know. It's what it was. It was in Vistascope. I guess it's like Technicolor. And this was, I guess, when all the films were doing, where it all kind of looks really like orange and blue, really vivid,
Mhm.
as opposed to black and white. Um,
Oh, yeah, all that oversaturated, yeah.
yeah, like the oh, anyway, yeah, this is a special movie, y'all. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say about this movie. And part of me wants to say to our listeners to go out and watch this film, but part of me doesn't want to do that either. I will say, and Matt, you kind of had a good idea. If you're looking for a so bad it's good, you may like this. I would suggest watching it with friends. Like, I think this could be fun if it was like a Halloween party that you were having with friends and you all wanted to get together and see some kind of cheesy ghost movie that you could kind of poke fun at. I will say this, it is not a long movie. I think it was only like an hour and not even an hour and a half, I don't think. But I can't in good faith really recommend it. If you're going to watch a Roger Corman film, there are certainly better ones to watch. Maybe it's worth watching a scene or two just to see baby Jack Nicholson, but even he doesn't. I mean, we know he's very talented and he's kind of wooden and stiff throughout the whole thing. Then again, the character isn't really fleshed out that much either. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying about this movie. It was a movie, maybe. Uh, if we're being loose in that definition. Um, so with that big bang of an ending there, this has been Roger Corman's The Terror from 1963. I guess I will say watch it if you dare. And I'm curious that if any of our listeners have actually seen this movie to let us know because I may need to, rehash this with somebody else. So please, we'd love to hear from you if you've seen the movie. If you're gonna watch the movie, let us know that too. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. If you'd like to contact us by email, please do. Send us an email at nofearcast@gmail.com. And if you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll get access to exclusive content, or you can simply rate and review us, which is entirely free and helps other listeners find us. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.